same era as Ted Edison, there's an ecologist named Frank Elgler. He's like a landscape ecologist, and he was a bit of a hermit. He lived in Northwest Connecticut. And I was kind of going through my notes, and I found this quote of his that I love. And he said, "Nature is not more complicated than you think. It's more complicated than you can think." And when I was thinking about Monhegan, that seemed to resonate with me. And it's this idea of how do you kind of reconcile your direct experience of the landscape in this really incredible place with the kind of the physical stuff of painting, the structure of the canvas, the color, and then whatever you're doing with imagery. And that's really what I am always trying to wrap my head around. And also like when you walk around in the landscape, you have these kind of moments of recognition, I think. And it's sort of like I don't know why that's moving. What conspires to kind of create that? And so my paintings, and this is where I thought of you, Amanda, like the idea of like things revealing and then being exposed, like when you walk around a tree and you see something. That's something I think a lot about in painting. And I'm generally using two paintings, and it's a lot about that. Always seeing two things in terms of each other, that you always see one thing in terms of another thing, and that it's about hiding and revealing and things being exposed. The paintings that I make tend towards abstraction, but they're often based on direct observations, images, color, and then various systems of language that have to do with the landscape, like weather, like wind maps or hillshade renderings or emergency signal flags, things like that. And so this was one of the paintings that I made when I was there. And where do you begin? When I got there, I was just so stunned by it was like every 2-inch turn of your head was a potential motif. It was just kind of overwhelming. So I really spent a lot of time when I got there, rambling around the trails, getting to know the island and drawing in my sketchbook. And I made a ton of these kind of colored pencil drawings from various sites on all of the trails. And it's really just a way it's like meeting somebody. It's like you're getting acquainted with them, beyond the kind of surface appearance. And, one of the challenges, I think, is that there is this huge history of painters and artists working out there. And yet there's sort of also infinite magic, but I found myself coming to the same sites of paintings that I see and think like, oh, that's amazing. But I started asking through these drawings, like, what else is here that I could maybe unearth or use in a painting that would, maybe take a more oblique point of view of what's going on here. So, as you wander around, you see things, and, obviously there are these life rings, right, with these fluorescent flags attached to them. And, the history of Monhegan, people have been swept off the rocks, right? And so you need these things. But I also thought it's so, gosh, if that happened, I don't know if I would have the mind of me to figure out how to even use this thing. So when I saw these things, they seemed more like, it was almost like more metaphoric, or a kind of framework for the space you were in. Like, even though it's really calm today, this landscape can be quite treacherous. And so that frames your point of view in a sense. When you see these things, it kind of signals to you something about the reality of that landscape that you're in. And so I got really interested in that. And I also thought about these like maritime signal flags, which you don't need to use anymore. You just call someone up, when you have a problem. But these things look like modernist paintings, and they're meant to kind of communicate universally. But nobody uses those in the same way anymore, just like modernist paintings too. And then, going to the museum, you see other kinds of representations of Monhegan, the various maps. And these are kind of like these hand-drawn, I think, hillshade renderings, which I thought were really beautiful. And you can go on, the government, you can get public data for mapping something. So I created this hillshade rendering of Monhegan, and thought about that as a representation of the island. And then, of course, it was hurricane season when I was there. It was September, and there were lots of storms that they didn't hit Monhegan, but like one went up to Noda, and we were certainly seeing the effects on the water and in the landscape of these storms. It was pretty impressive. So I was always checking the weather apps and the tides and things like that to kind of see what's going on. And that's another way that your experience or my experience is kind of so. It's like while you're having a direct experience, you're also aware of these other things through the world that we live in. And so when I start painting, I just kind of keep all that stuff in the back of my head, and then I improvise. And it may be that there's like a lobster buoy that like gave me the idea of this like orange marker, and I just used as a kind of frame. And it also like seems like some kind of emergency or something. And I just started with that. I don't know what it's about. I think other times I just responded to something in a sketchbook and started painting with those colors, and then followed through from there. And then I just surround myself with a kind of, I guess, a set of possibilities from drawings and watercolors that are made out in the landscape, things that I brought that have to do with weather. This is a painting that I made while I was there based on a gale warning. There was a gale warning, and so I was thinking about the gale warning flag, which when you see it whole, it's square and it's red with a black square center. Two of them together is the hurricane. But I painted part of it as if it was in sunset light, so it turned it orange with brown center. And then other times I realized I had to bring these things out into the landscape to paint, from direct observation, because there's nothing that replaces doing that. And it's so incredible to paint out on Monhegan in this way. So this one was out, in Cathedral Woods or the Maple Trail somewhere. And so over time, the paintings, I feel like I'm kind of listening for a click, like in a lock, like I'm trying to find a combination of things that comes together and gives me some recognition of place and my understanding of that place in the painting itself, in the stuff of the painting itself. So this is one that I made, and this frame, it's fluorescent and it's totally based on this kind of yellowish green flag. I just like took the color from that. So it's really a cultural color, and it's a partial frame. And then the colors in the painting came from this little study that I did out at Pulpit Rock, I think. And, just the idea that these wind maps are seen actually on the water itself, right? You experience those in real life. And so I was thinking about how to put that together in this. And this is how that one ended up with the fluorescent orange frame. This orange is really different than this. In person, it's like a way different color situation. But then I pulled this painting out, I think to Burnt Head, and I painted the sunset with the sunset at my back. So I was like looking east, which always gives you that kind of like beautiful pink glow when you look the other way from the sunset. So looking out to the Atlantic from Burnt Head is where that was kind of painted, and there was this gale warning thing. And I'm really looking like the shapes too are important in the sense that I like the associations. Like I didn't know it before I did it, but when I started playing with this, I'm like, oh, it's like a sail or a wing or some other thing that you might find in a landscape. And so I sort of liked that about it. And then I really struggled with the painting in the forest because one of the things that, and it occurred to me later, one of the things that's really special about the forest there is that they're surrounded by the ocean. So like when you're making a painting of it, you can't show that really. So then I was thinking, well, it's framed by the ocean. So I'll actually paint onto the frame this sunset over the ocean at Monhegan. And then the frame is almost like a tree as well. And so I got really interested in that. These are some drawings I made kind of leading up to that painting, and this close-ups. And, when you get up close, you can see the, Trail 11, Cathedral Woods. I always wondered if it's just interesting that it's like two verticals and it's a cathedral. and it's the number 11 like that. Is that a coincidence, or was that planned? I thought that was amazing in there. And then this is actually a painting I made at home. It was kind of about the Maine coast, and I had started it before I went to Monhegan, and I didn't know how to finish it. And when I got back, I saw immediately how to finish it. So Monhegan helped me solve this painting at home. And these are these kind of hurricane things. And this is from a man overboard flag. And these are just some details. This is Fitzhugh Lane, one of the Luminist painters who painted, that's Penobscot Bay there. And so like this piece is sort of derived from, the history of painting this part of Maine. And that's just to give you a sense of scale. Those are some other paintings with the Monhegan one. I showed them together like that this summer. And there it is at the residency on shingles. I did a little studio visit out there, and that was, so much fun, and to meet some people. So that is it.